I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our Insider Insight Show. I'm honored to have back with me someone I consider a very dear friend and someone who has been an incredible freedom fighter, fighting for every American's and frankly every person of the world's freedoms and liberties. He's put his life on the line for decades. And unfortunately, in my opinion, not enough people have said thank you to Mike Cutler for everything he has done. A little background on Mike, because one of the problems when you watch the bought-off lamestream fake media is the people they bring on that are so-called experts, end quote, they're not experts. They don't have any experience in the field. They, in fact, maybe even have journalism degrees or general studies degrees, but they don't have any boots-on-the-ground experience. And this is why Mike Cutler is absolutely valuable to the safety and security of every American. Let me give you a little background on Mike's history and his background. Mike has 30 years of experience with the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. There were a number of positions that Mike held, including immigration inspector assigned to Kennedy International Airport in New York. Mike was an examiner to the unit, which was responsible for adjudicating petitions filed by the United States citizens and lawfully admitted resident aliens on behalf of their alien spouses. Mike was a criminal investigator, a special agent for the INS in New York City. Mike was also an INS representative to the Unified Intelligence Division of the DEA in New York. He was also a senior special agent assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. Mike's career was unusual in that it provided him with a sort of, if you will, grand tour that gave him extensive insight into many aspects of immigration, but also provided him with an intimate view on how immigration impacted other law enforcement agencies within the United States. He has a website, Michael Cutler, C-U-T-L-E-R, michaelcutler.net, chock full of information. Mike has his own radio show, which we'll have him speak about. Mike is an incredible author. He is prolific. He writes for Front Page Magazine, just to name one. It's my honor to welcome back my friend Michael Cutler. Mike, welcome back to the Insider Insight Show.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. You're very kind. We're coming up on the 19th anniversary of the terror attacks of 9/11. And in fact, I have an article that Front Page will be running on 9/11. It's a retrospective of where we are today, 19 years after the attack. But one thing I want everyone to think about, this is going to be the first presidential election where voters will be voting who were born after the terrorist attacks. Mm-hmm. So they don't even understand what this is about. The schools have often failed to teach the dangers. Mm-hmm. I've spoken to young people in their 20s who tell me that they know more about Pearl Harbor than 9/11. Think about that. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to make an analogy between 9/11 and Pearl Harbor, I think it's an apt analogy. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese fleet attacked Pearl Harbor. More people died, however, on 9/11 than were killed by the Japanese fleet at Pearl Harbor. And the 9/11 attacks were carried out by just 19 terrorists who were not heavily armed. They had box cutters and turned airliners into cruise missiles. Think about that. And it wasn't the first time that America was attacked by foreign nationals who came here from the Middle East, radical Islamists, to attack us. Rabbi Meir Kahane was killed in the 80s. A young man, Ari Halberstam, was killed on the Brooklyn Bridge. He was in a yeshiva van, a religious school student, a teenager, young kid, shot. Why? Because he was in a van that was marked as a van that went to a yeshiva. We had the several terror attacks in the United States in 93, the bombing of the World Trade Center, February 93, almost brought the tower down sideways into the other tower. It's estimated that if that had happened, hundreds of thousands would have died, the seawall would have ruptured, buildings would have fallen like dominoes, lower Manhattan might still be uninhabitable. Just think about the magnitude of that attack. Mm-hmm. A month earlier, we had a shooting at the CIA by Kansi, a Pakistani national who had applied for political asylum, got himself a partnership in a courier service, used that van that he had a permit to park in the parking lot of the CIA to pull into the CIA on a cold January morning, jump out with an AK-47 and open fire. He killed 2 CIA officers, wounded 3 others, and fled the country. Understand that when foreign nationals come to the United States and they are able, or they commit a crime, they're able to escape through an escape hatch Americans don't have. They go back to their home countries.
Hmm.
And frequently, those countries do not have extradition arrangements with the United States. So they can laugh all the way into old age, confident that nobody will reach them. In the case of Kansi, given the nature of the crime, however, our intelligence people worked with Pakistani intelligence. We got him. We brought him back, put him on trial. He was found guilty and executed, but it didn't bring back the dead, nor did it heal the wounds. So this is what we're really dealing with. This has been going on forever.
Hmm.
And I did my very first congressional hearing. You know, I've testified before. I think we're up to 17 hearings. I doubt I'll be doing any more. I've infuriated people on both sides of the aisle. That's fine. I'm as proud of my friends as I am my enemies because I've acquired them for the right reasons.
Right.
But they really need listenings, not hearings in Washington. What was the point to the 9/11 Commission to which I provided testimony? What were the reasons for all those hearings? Supposedly so we don't make the same mistakes. So think about this. The bombing of the World Trade Center was carried out by two illegal aliens. They didn't run the border. It's more than the Mexican border. We're a country of 50 border states. Any state with an international airport, any state that lies on the northern or southern borders, any state that has access to America's 95,000 miles of coastline are all border states. Who am I leaving out? So understand the danger.
Mm-hmm.
So these two guys violated their status when they were in the United States, so they were here illegally. They still had driver's licenses. They were still able to rent the truck that they filled with explosives, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at further terror attacks that we've seen since 9/11, I don't know of a single attack that has involved an airplane since 9/11. What we keep seeing repeatedly around the world is the use of motor vehicles, trucks, vans. Also, vehicles like that give terrorists the opportunity to scope out locations, have clandestine meetings with co-conspirators. If you're driving a cab, someone gets in the back of the cab. Is he a passenger? Maybe. Are they having a meeting? Maybe. Could they be handing each other memory sticks from a computer? Absolutely. So understand what motor vehicles mean. And in New York State, the state hammered the worst on 9/11. Imbecile governor has been giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens, which violates the findings and recommendations of the 9/11 Commission. And that's not bad enough. He is now blocking access to DMV information by ICE and the Border Patrol. Why? Well, you've got to protect the immigrants. Well, if you want to protect the immigrants, you do the exact opposite.
That's right.
You have criminals and terrorists. And by the way, he does understand the danger in what he's doing because he's concerned about Canada. It's my understanding that Canada gets all the information they want instantaneously. So a foreign government can call up motor vehicles. Yes, sir. What do you need? Right away, sir. Here it is, sir. Have we given you enough? Do you need more? Oh, you're with the Border Patrol? Go to hell. Bam.
Right.
I just want you to think about
this is off.
and understand, folks, you can laugh at New York, but a New Yorker can come to your state and blow you up. Because once you have a driver's license, you can go anywhere in the United States and its possessions, rent a vehicle, do whatever you want to do, walk into government and corporate office buildings on the strength of a New York driver's license, and we're giving out hundreds of thousands of licenses to quote-unquote undocumented immigrants. And what does that mean? They can't prove who they are. Just think about the lunacy of that. So why did they have the hearings? You know, I testified for Sheila Jackson Lee. Both sides of the aisle were absolutely determined to protect us right after the attacks. These people have short memory. You think Joe Biden is walking around in a daze? Our politicians are walking around in a daze, and this raises an issue. We've had sanctuary cities for quite some time, even Ed Koch going back to the 80s. I loved Ed Koch. I thought he was the best mayor we ever had. He was wrong on this issue, and in one case, it cost a cop his life. I had physically deported an alien, a Panamanian who had a green card, lost it because of multiple convictions for drug and gun-related crimes. Okay? He came back, but the sanctuary policies under Koch prevented the NYPD from notifying immigration. Reentry is a crime, by the way. And I worked with Al D'Amato to make it a 20-year felony. So last year, it was the most frequently prosecuted felony for the entire Justice Department. Over 25,000 aliens prosecuted because they were criminals who'd been deported and came back. Well, this individual, Ronaldo Rayside, this Panamanian, came back, was arrested by the New York City Police Department twice. The third time he kills a New York City cop, I testified at the murder trial. These are not victimless crimes. No. So now ask yourself, after 9/11, after all the things that have happened, after we've seen motor vehicles being used in terror attacks, even on the West Side Highway, just about 3 blocks from Ground Zero 2 years ago, 8 bicyclists, I believe from Argentina, were mowed down by a terrorist in a truck. And look at all the barricades you see around the buildings. If you think that people don't understand the nexus between vehicles and terrorism, you're crazy. They have barriers. They have these big concrete flower pots. They're not flower pots. They're barriers. They just dress them up to look like flower pots. Okay? Why do they have them? Because they know about the dangers posed by car bombs and truck bombs. But we're allowing people to get behind the wheel who may be terrorists. If this isn't insane, I want someone to tell me what insanity looks like. So my question is this: why are they doing it? Why would you do it? See, that we're protecting the immigrants below. Do you know who they're really protecting? Human traffickers, drug smugglers, organized crime, terrorist organizations, crooked lawyers, crooked employers who knowingly hire illegal aliens. How do sanctuary cities protect them? I will tell you very easily. The way you put a case together against a human trafficker, and I was part of the first anti-smuggling unit in New York. I was in every single squad within the investigations branch. I also worked with foreign governments. Canada, Great Britain, Israel. I got an award from the government of Japan. This isn't about brown skin or Mexicans or Latinos, okay? And the BS media today, they're at it again. Oh, the Latino voter, the black voter. We're American voters, folks. This is a divide and conquer strategy, and you're even hearing it on Fox News. I mean, this is nuts. So how do you put together a smuggling case? Well, you have to arrest an alien who was smuggled into the country. And then you play let's make a deal. You want to stay here? Absolutely. I'll make you a deal. I can let you stay here for up to 6 months, and I'll get your permission so you can even work. You won't have to look over your shoulder. You tell me who brought you here. And they do. You tell me who got these people in. Where are the safe houses? Do you have any phone numbers? And you will have people who want to play let's make a deal. Now, you have this nonsense, oh, people won't come forward if they're here illegally and they're raped or they're beaten. Baloney. We can give visas to the victims of crimes if they help us get the people who hurt them.
That's right.
Could it be better than that? In fact, my friends at DEA always said to me, that's why one of the reasons they wanted an agent at Unified Intelligence, I was the first one to draw that assignment, was to use immigration authority to cultivate informants and cooperating witnesses. My friends at the DEA and FBI had limitless money. We used to joke that they must have had a printing press in the basement. Immigration was always cash poor. Believe it or not, there were days I had to borrow a government credit card from the FBI or DEA to gas up my government car. But they said I had something far more valuable than money: the ability to keep illegal aliens in the United States if they cooperated. It was amazing. I had a list of informants you wouldn't believe, and we used to have expertise in different ethnic crime groups. So if the FBI or DEA or New York City Police were working a case involving people from Guyana or Japan or China or Jamaica, they would come to immigration because we had the informants and we had agents who developed insight into all those communities. It's all gone. It's all gone by the globalists. It started when Jimmy Carter said we're going to use the word immigrant to describe illegal aliens. By the way, the word alien isn't an insult. It's a legal term that simply means any person not a citizen or national of the United States. Where's the insult? It's not the N word. By the way, it's interesting. The DREAM Act, everybody wants you to forget this, but it was an acronym. Development, Relief, and Education of what? Of what? Alien minors. So now the word alien is palatable when it pushes a corrupt agenda. See, I have a theory about why we have sanctuary cities, and I can't prove it. I'm not making an accusation. I'm only asking a question. Could it be that the mayors of sanctuary cities have been bought off by drug smugglers? Could it be that the mayors and governors of sanctuary jurisdictions have been bought off by terrorist organizations? Could it be that politicians are being blackmailed because they were caught doing things with children or people they shouldn't have been doing things with? So now they get that phone call in the middle of the night that they dreaded. Hey, you want me to go to the media with the video? Uh-oh, what do I have to do? Declare your city a sanctuary or else. Could it be? Maybe not. But isn't that an interesting bit of food for thought? After 9/11, after it was warned that interior enforcement was critical, absolutely critical. And it was remarkable that George W. Bush, this isn't a left-right issue. George W. Bush created the Department of Homeland Surrender. When I testified for John Hostler, and I testified from a bunch of times, he was a conservative Republican, would hammer the Bush administration because of the damage they did to national security. And in fact, there was a hearing, and I quote him in my article that's on Front Page right now. I hope after the program, everybody will go to frontpagemag.com, because the title of my article, by the way, is Radical Democrats Have Become the Adversaries of Freedom. But you will see, I'm sorry, I think I got the Bush quote possibly in my 9/11 article. I'm confusing the two articles because I've been working like crazy. But in any event, what Hostetler said was the way they put immigration together, cutting it in half between CBP, Customs and Border Protection, and ICE, and blending in other agencies, made it impossible to secure the borders or enforce the immigration laws, even after it was proven that the only reason the terrorists were able to attack us was because of failures of immigration law enforcement, not customs law enforcement, not TSA enforcement, purely immigration enforcement. And you have cities and you have Joe Biden now promising that they will decriminalize immigration laws, that they will give free college, free education, and free health care to anybody in the country, no matter how they get here. So what are we doing? And people say to me, well, Joe Biden's a nice guy. And we see it in the media all the time. What a nice guy. He's such a friendly guy. He's got a great personality. Let me tell you what. I spent 30 years in law enforcement. I worked closely with the NYPD. I had desks at the FBI for 10 years, DEA for 15 years. Con artists have the nicest personalities in the universe. Do you think Madoff, if he was nasty, could have gotten the right time of day from people?
That's right.
Of course not. He swindled some of the smartest people in America, political leaders, CEOs of companies. The list of Madoff's victims looks like a who's who.
True.
How did he do it? You think he was nasty? Of course not. When people are nasty, you tell them they can take a long walk on a short pier and you walk away from them. They ingratiate themselves. They compliment you. Wow, what a great suit. You look fabulous, Dave. That's terrific. How your family doing? What's going on, buddy? And meanwhile, he's picking their pockets.
Right.
He took their life savings. Joe Biden is a pathological liar. Now he's in a fog. But forget the days of Joe Biden in a fog. Go back to when he plagiarized a speech that he gave when he was running for president previously, when he lied about how many degrees he had, when he lied about his standing in the class, his college class. Look, and why would he even do it? He's just pathological. I'll tell anybody that I squeaked by with a 201 index when I graduated. I had lost both of my parents to cancer. I'm not looking for an excuse, but things happen. But what's the big deal? We are who we are. Colin Powell used to joke that, he was a C student, all right? But Joe Biden is pathological. He will say whatever it takes to win an election. And let me prove to you how he's lying. If Joe Biden is elected, he's promised he's going to legalize 11 million illegal aliens.
Right.
That is the biggest lie anybody will ever tell you. They may as well tell you that the sky is yellow and the earth is a cube. The 11 million, even if you look at websites from the major universities, most liberal colleges, the number is probably closer to 25 million by their estimate. By my estimate, it's 30 to 40 million. But that's only small potatoes, folks. Here's what nobody's ever going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you. Just like Reagan said 1 million would get amnesty, and I had real issues with Reagan, we wound up with almost 4 million. The one number you still don't know is how many children came in.
That's right.
When you legalize an alien, and I agree with this, the way I do this, I don't believe in the extended family, what they call chain migration, brothers and sisters. No, it's nonsense. But if you could put that family member on your health insurance, you ought to be able to give them a green card. So if I have health insurance, and I do, who has insurance on my policy? My wife and my son, who's under the age of 26. You could do the same thing with immigration, except it would be 21, let's say. But you get the general idea.
Right.
So this makes sense. If you legalize 25 million aliens, number one, there's no interviews There's no field investigations. You can't do it. Just impossible. That's why I came to call it the Terrorist Assistance and Facilitation Act in an op-ed I wrote for the Washington Times, and then Senator Jeff Sessions quoted me from the floor of the Senate on 3 separate days with attribution, and then sent me a very nice certificate. He said he believed that his ability to use my words convinced enough of his colleagues to vote it down. But now I'm calling it the Overwhelm America Act. Because not only will this provide an opportunity for terrorists to embed themselves, and the 9/11 Commission was clear about it. And again, 19 hijackers killed more people, and the death toll continues, by the way, as people continue to die from the toxins they were exposed to. But could you imagine the average family in third world countries have 8, 9, 10, 12 kids? Some men have children with multiple women. Every single one of those children under the age of 21 is absolutely 100% guaranteed immediate entry into the United States of America. So let's be optimistic and say we're dealing with 25 million. It could be 30, it could be 40. We won't know when they got here. No interviews. How do you prove when you entered if you sneak into the country, you run the border? But now let's be an optimist and say they bring in on average 4 children each. How much is 4 times 25 million? And I'm being an optimist.
100 million.
100 million children within 2 years. What will that do to the education system, which is already being slammed?
Yeah.
What will that do to inflation, because you have all these mouths to feed? You know, most people don't realize this, but it's more than finding a place for someone to sleep when you bring someone to America, because they have an environmental footprint. They need water, they need electricity, they need heating and air conditioning and transportation and access to hospitals, sewerage services. My goodness gracious, food, clothing, shelter. The price of housing will go through the roof. Wages will drop. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that it costs 20 to 40% more to educate kids who can't read, write, or read English. What would that do? And by the way, these kids aren't going to stay kids forever. You know, you buy a cute little puppy dog, he grows up pretty quick to become an adult dog, right? Mm-hmm. Children grow up to become workers, hopefully. So where do we find jobs for 100 million new workers? So when Biden says, I'm going to get you the best jobs and wages are going up. No, they're not. No, they're not. This is the Madoff-Kahn scam. You're going to flood America with 100 million people. Wages are going through the floor. Jobs are going away. Homelessness is going to go through the roof. And we have a laboratory experiment that proves I'm right. Venezuela. Look at what happened when the communists took over what was at the time the wealthiest, most incredible nation in all of South America. It is now a dump. Okay? And I want to read something to you because I'm a registered Democrat. And people say to me, Cutler, what is wrong with you? How could you be a Democrat? Well, my idea of a Democrat was John F. Kennedy. And so I was doing a little bit of research. It's funny how I came upon this. Divine intervention, perhaps. Although I'm not particularly religious, you do wonder. There was a wonderful movie, The Adjustment Bureau. If you get a chance, it's thought-provoking. But Kennedy, the reason I started to look up Kennedy, you know, Trump is being accused of dismantling NATO. In point of fact, it was Eisenhower who created NATO, and Eisenhower is my hero. The way he dealt with the D-Day and creating the military-industrial complex and then warning about his own creation, putting everything together, Supreme Commander of Allied Forces. There was no American president with a more incredible bio than Eisenhower, okay? And he was the one who created NATO and then said, wait a minute, all of our allies have become freeloaders. So every president, Eisenhower included, has tried to get the NATO countries to pay their fair share. Mm-hmm. Trump is the first guy to pull it off.
Right.
Think about that. Mm-hmm. So I was looking to see what Kennedy might have had to say, and I came up with a speech that John F. Kennedy gave, and this was on May 25th, 1961, almost 60 years ago. My goodness. This is 20 days after Alan Shepard was launched into space, the first American astronaut on that 15-minute Mercury flight. I actually got a letter from Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom when I was a kid. I wouldn't trade those letters for anything. Those were my heroes. Football heroes, not so much. My favorite oxymoron is heroic play. I'm trying to figure out how you can be a hero when you're playing. But what do I know? So this is what Kennedy said to a joint session of Congress. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, my co-partners in government. Wow, what a way to address the Congress. My co-partners in government, contrast to where we are today.
Right.
Gentlemen and ladies. Well, you kind of flipped that. I think he'd get in trouble, but that's okay. The Constitution imposes upon me the obligation to, from time to time, give to the Congress information of the State of the Union. While this has traditionally been interpreted as an annual affair, this tradition has been broken in extraordinary times, and these are extraordinary times. And we face an extraordinary challenge. Our strength, as well as our convictions, have imposed upon this nation the role of leader in freedom's cause. No role in history could be more difficult or more important. We stand for freedom. Mm-hmm. That is our conviction for ourselves. That is our only commitment to others. No friend, no neutral, no adversary should think otherwise. We are not against any man or any nation or any system except as it is hostile to freedom. Nor am I here to present a new military doctrine bearing any one name or aimed at any one area. I am here to promote the freedom doctrine. It's amazing they don't teach this. The great battleground for the defense and expansion of freedom today is the whole southern half of the globe, Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, the lands of the rising peoples. Their revolution is the greatest in human history. They seek an end to injustice, tyranny, and exploitation. More than an end, they seek a beginning. And theirs is a revolution which we would support regardless of the Cold War and regardless of which political or economic route they should choose to follow. For the adversaries of freedom did not create the revolution, nor did they create the conditions which compel it, but they are seeking to ride the crest of its wave to capture it for themselves. Yet their aggression is more often concealed than open. They have fired no missiles, and their troops are seldom seen. They send arms, agitators, aid technicians, and propaganda to every troubled area. But where fighting is required, it is usually done by others, by guerrillas striking at night, by assassins striking alone, assassins who've taken the lives of 4,000 civil officers in the last 12 months in Vietnam alone, by subversives and saboteurs and insurrectionists who, in some cases, control whole areas inside of independent nations. Let's just stop there. Mm-hmm. Let me read that again. In some cases, control whole areas inside of independent nations. Does that seem to have a parallel in the United States today, like the CHOP zone?
Yeah, absolutely.
Think about that, folks. Mm-hmm. You see, that's why I entitled my article that the Democrats are now the adversaries of freedom. But I'll continue. They possess a powerful intercontinental striking force, large forces for conventional war, a well-trained underground of nearly every country, the power to conscript talent and manpower for any purpose. Think of Antifa today. Mm-hmm. The capacity for quick decisions, a closed society without dissent or free information. Without dissent or free information. Fake news, folks. A closed society without dissent or information and long experience in the techniques of violence and subversion. Look at what's been happening. Mm-hmm. They make the most of their scientific successes, their economic progress, and they're posed as a foe of colonialism and a friend of popular revolution. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said that she was an opponent of colonialism. Think about that. But I continue. They prey on unstable or unpopular governments. They've made our government unpopulated to masses of people who have been disenfranchised because of the globalists. Okay?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Now, let me continue. Unsealed or unknown boundaries, a.k.a. open borders, no immigration enforcement. You see? Unfilled hopes, convulsive change, massive poverty, illiteracy, unrest, and frustration. With the importation of tens of millions of illegal aliens, what do you wind up with? Poverty, illiteracy, unrest, and frustration. This sets the stage. Do you see what we're dealing with? And then he said, with these formidable weapons, the adversaries of freedom plan to consolidate their territory, to exploit, to control, and finally to destroy the hopes of the world's newest nations. Today, substitute the word United States of America for the world's newest nations. Mm-hmm. And they have ambition to do it before the end of this decade. It is a contest of will and purpose as well as force and violence a battle for minds and souls, and Biden talked about this being a battle for the minds and souls of America, down to the letter, ladies and gentlemen, as well as lives and territory. And in that contest, we cannot stand aside. We stand as we have always stood from our earliest beginnings for the independence and equality of all nations. This nation was born of revolution and raised in freedom, and we do not intend to leave an open road for despotism. There is no single simple policy which meets this challenge. Experience has taught us that no one nation has the power or the wisdom to solve all of the problems of the world or manage its revolutionary tides. That extending our commitments does not always increase our security. That any initiative carries with it the risk of temporary defeat. That nuclear weapons cannot prevent subversion. Now listen carefully to this sentence. That no free people can be kept free without the will and energy of their own. John F. Kennedy was speaking to you 60 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. And that no two nations or situations are exactly alike. Yet there's much that we can do. The proposals I bring before you are numerous and varied. They arise from a host of special opportunities and dangers, which have become increasingly clear in recent months. Taken together, I believe that they can mark another step forward in our effort as a people. I'm here to ask this Congress and the nation in approving these necessary measures. But I also want to read something about economics and American workers. Again, why I'm a Democrat. I'm a JFK Democrat, folks. The first and basic task confronting this nation this year was to turn recession into recovery. Are we not in the same situation today?
True.
An affirmative anti-recession program initiated with your cooperation supported the natural forces in the private sector, and our economy is now enjoying renewed confidence and energy. The recession has been halted. Recovery is underway. But the task of abating unemployment and achieving a full use of our resources does remain a serious challenge for us all. Large-scale unemployment during a period of prosperity large-scale unemployment during a recession is bad enough, but large-scale unemployment during a period of prosperity would be intolerable. And he finally says this, and there's more, and if you get the article, you can read all of it. You can even listen to him deliver it, because there's a link to a recording of him, and it's worth listening to him. He inspired me to become involved in public speaking and debate, which is what I got my degree in. But he also says this: I am therefore transmitting to the Congress a new manpower development and training program to train or retrain several 100,000 workers, particularly in those areas where we've seen chronic unemployment as a result of technological factors and new occupational skills over a 4-year period, in order to replace those skills made obsolete by automation and industrial change with new skills which these new processes demand. He didn't say, let's get on the phone and call India for more workers.
Right.
He didn't say, let's bring in the world's best and brightest. John F. Kennedy said, we're going to create a manpower development and training program to train hundreds of thousands of American workers so they could deal with the increasing technology. Do you now understand why Mike Cutler is a Democrat? The Democrat Party has become the party of totalitarians and fascists. And you know, when people call them progressives, that's dangerous. When I was a kid, I used to get excited because, first of all, GE used to have a slogan, progress is our most important product. The other thing was, I always loved Walt Disney. I wouldn't go to Disney for anything. They fired all their American programmers. There's a place in hell for them. And they made them train their replacements from India. Just think about it. But they had Tomorrowland. So we think of tomorrow, it's flying cars and better technology, and it's very exciting. Let me be clear. There is nothing progressive about the Democrats. They're regressive. The Republicans aren't much better.
True.
We've only had one president since Eisenhower and Kennedy who understand the need for sovereignty. Whether you like him or not, whether you like his personality or not, doesn't matter. The person is Donald Trump. He's the one who has said, we're going to stop bringing in foreign workers. We're going to make China responsible for the damage they've done. And, you know, I wrote another article, and I said that what Trump is calling for really parallels what Abe Lincoln had said. Abraham Lincoln envisioned a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, meaning what? Putting Americans first.
That's right.
And so President Trump gets elected and said, we're going to put Americans first, and people are complaining. Have you lost your mind? Have you lost your mind? Look, your neighbors that don't get it are being brainwashed, and people have invested an awful lot into their beliefs. Nobody will call you up and say, Dave, I just got robbed. I went to buy a car and the guy swindled me. They're not going to tell you. They're embarrassed.
Right.
When they get a good deal, then they're going to call you up. Boy, did I get a great deal. I got $5,000 off on a new Corvette. I'll take you for a ride. They're happy. When they find out they've been swindled, they get very quiet. You know how many people fall victim to con artists and then they don't tell the police because they're embarrassed?
Right.
How do I tell the police I just lost my life savings because I was an idiot? So they don't report it, especially the elderly.
Mm-hmm.
People that have fallen for the lies are invested in the lies. They don't want to have to say to you, you know, I was an idiot. They may vote for Trump and not want to talk about it. We get that also. Mm-hmm. But here's what I recommend. Remember what Kennedy said about the will of the people. Speak to your neighbors and just ask them questions. Does it make sense to bring in 100 million foreign children? This isn't because we dislike them. You know, we've all had the situation of arranging a Thanksgiving dinner or a wedding or a bar mitzvah or a confirmation or whatever, a celebration. Mm-hmm. And then you say, well, wait a minute, how much money do we have? How big is our dining room? Mm-hmm. Right? Even for lunch, how many pizzas do we have? How many people can we have come over and share pizza?
Right.
If I have 3 pizzas, I'm not going to invite 80 people.
Right.
And where would I put them?
Yeah.
And that's where America is.
That's
where
right.
People say, oh, you don't want them here because you're a hater. No. I don't want them here because we can't deal with them. This is a lifeboat. And if the lifeboat capsizes, we're all going to drown. So we have to understand that just as people understand that we're a country, we're people of limits, this is a country of limitations. As it is, we have the most generous policies. And don't let anyone tell you that my position is anti-immigrant. It's pro-enforcement.
That's right.
But I was an adjudicator for a year, and I was thrilled to authorize green cards for aliens. We didn't go to work and say, how do we screw people today? This is fun. No. Right. How do we enforce the laws? And the laws were designed to keep out criminals who have dangerous communicable diseases, mental illness, criminals and terrorists and human traffickers and sex offenders and gang members. And then we get to aliens who have become a public charge to take the jobs Americans need. There's nothing racist about it. There's nothing that discriminates. You know who does discriminate? The people who talk about white privilege. Mm-hmm. That's discriminatory. When you could look at another human being and make a value judgment about that person based on race, good or bad, that's the classic example of racism. I believe in American privilege, a privilege that we're rapidly losing because of the crooks that we've elected to office, and they've abused their authority, and they're taking campaign contributions, and those really aren't campaign contributions. It's Orwellian to call it a campaign contribution. It's a bribe.
It is.
And then you hear the politicians, I don't take PAC money, I just take the small dump. Baloney. The party gets the PAC money and they distribute it to these crooks.
True.
Now, if I couldn't take a cup of coffee, this was as much as I was allowed to take if I knocked on someone's door, and they weren't the target of my investigation. They were simply a neighbor, and I wanted to know if they've seen unusual activity. People were very happy to see us. Mm-hmm. And they'd say, we're having coffee and cake. Why don't you join us? I wasn't allowed to do that. All I could accept was a glass of ice water. Why? To keep the public at arm's length, to keep objectivity. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the politicians are taking with both hands.
Yeah.
Look, if you think that the immigration system is failing, I'm here to tell you it's not failing. It's become a delivery system. It delivers an unlimited supply of cheap, exploitable labor. And it's not just the illegals, it's the visas and everything else. And I guarantee you there's no compassion in exploitation. It delivers an unlimited supply of foreign tourists. That's why we keep expanding the visa waiver program. I'm sorry to tell you, Trump just made Poland number 39. On 9/11, we had 26 visa waiver countries. And what's amazing, the Chamber of Commerce created the Discover America Partnership, where they pressured Congress by dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into campaigns and saying we have a travel crisis in America. a travel crisis in 2007. And that's when the hearings all stopped that I was doing, with one or two exceptions. Because we're keeping too many people out of America. Unbelievable. It also delivers, and this is what's really critical, an unlimited supply of clients for immigration law
Well,
firms.
that's right.
And if you look at Bob Goodlatte, the
Mm-hmm.
former chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, he was an immigration lawyer before he came to Congress, and he made his money, and lots of it, from what I understand, practicing H-1B visa law in 4 states, according to newspaper accounts. And his son, by the way, you can look it up, Bobby Goodlatte. I won't tell you anything I can't prove. Bobby Goodlatte, he told me about his son. I didn't know anything about him, but he was running his mouth because he was so arrogant and stupid. And he said, my son would love to have hundreds or tens of thousands of brilliant Indian programmers come to America. My first wife tragically died of cancer 34 years ago. She was a brilliant programmer. Phi Beta Kappa graduate, MBA Computer Science, National Math Honor Society. Most of her colleagues had similar credentials and achievements. They were brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I used to feel like the village idiot when I went out to dinner with her friends. I would just sit there and be quiet because why let people know how dumb I am? Seriously, these are brilliant people. They've been fired and replaced by people from India. Why? Why? So we have a transference of intellectual property all over the world. You have Harvard University under investigation, Trump doing that also.
Mm-hmm.
The chairman of the chemical biology department at Harvard was caught taking money from China without acknowledging it. He was working in the labs at Hunan province down the road from where we believe COVID-19 started.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not linking him to that, but the point is they have bought out our best and brightest. They bribed them.
True.
And DeVos, the Secretary of Education, has opened an investigation into at least $6 billion in money going to our best universities, MIT, all the others, without it being reported. So how much money have they been giving to these universities all along? Tens of billions of dollars. And who's been doing it? Our good friends from China,
Right.
Saudi Arabia,
Right.
Qatar, possibly Russia and Iran as well. And what are they getting for the money? I'm glad you asked. They are picking faculty members and they are influencing the curriculum. Then they are also working to undermine our allies. I just read a disturbing piece that Harvard just hired a counselor for the students there. Reportedly, the guy was with the PLO, who had made public statements that when Israelis are attacked with knives, it's justified because the people with the knives are just defending themselves against the state of Israel. So this guy is now going to be a counselor at one of our most prestigious universities. That's what we're getting for the money.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting subversion. And I want you to go back to what Kennedy said, because everything that he said about the emerging democracies now applies to what's happening inside the United States. We have this anniversary coming up. Ilhan Omar had said 9/11 was when some people did something, and you had supposed journalists saying, oh, they took that out of context. How could you possibly interpret it any other way?
No.
You had Mayor de Blasio, D-U-H, de Blasio, and what did he say? Oh, we can't have those twin searchlights at Ground Zero, which we've had since after 9/11, because the COVID virus. You can riot, you can demonstrate,
Right.
you can smash windows, you can burn police cars, but don't you dare put up those twin lights, and there's going to be no reading of the names. Well, I got to tell you, Frank Stiller of the Stephen Stiller Foundation, Tunnels to Tower, they're going to do it. He does great work. I had the privilege to meet with Frank Stiller at the Green Room at Fox. And he said, you're not getting away with this. But now ask yourself why. Because the goal is to rewrite history. And again, I quote Orwell because Orwell said, if you want to destroy a people, destroy their history. Was America always right and glorious? Of course not. Nobody is. I bet you there are days that we all have in our minds where we wish we could go back in time and erase those days because we made some pretty god-awful decisions. But America has worked harder than any other country to right its wrongs, to be an inspiration for freedom around the world. Mm-hmm. And even as China has trampled on Hong Kong, what flags were they waving in Hong Kong? The American flag. And if you look at France, its flag is blue, white, and red. Why? The tricolor, the tricolor. Why? Because they modeled their revolution on the American Revolution. Even the Russian flag is red, white, and blue. So you have people that have been conned into believing that this is some kind of a horrible nation. You know, I would love to know, I know we're running short on time, but I just wanted to make a couple of quick points additionally if I can do this.
Please do.
All right. I work very closely with the New York City Police Department. The idea of defunding the police. Folks, and we've talked about this before, Johns Hopkins has done studies that show that anywhere from 250 to 440,000 people died of medical malpractice back in 2018. We've lost a handful of people to the police. One death is unacceptable. Let me be clear. One death is unacceptable. But has anyone said, let's defund the hospitals because they've killed hundreds of thousands of people?
No.
Of course not. You look at it and say, how can we improve? How can we lower the... Maybe we ought to look at police officers who were burned out or people who shouldn't have been made cops in the first place. Maybe we ought to let police officers retire after a few years. You go to the military, you join the Army. After 5 years, you can leave. That's great. We'll give you a small pension so you don't feel you wasted your time. It's honorable. We'll give you the equivalent of an honorable discharge so you can tell people you served the community, and now you can become a cabinet maker or a school teacher or a librarian or open a corner delicatessen. I don't care. But some people are traumatized. I've been out there on the street. The things I've seen on the street, I got to tell you, keep me awake to this day at night. And people deal with stress differently. There's a lot of people with badges who have suffered post-traumatic stress. So we need to address that. And in fact, the Justice Department yesterday issued a statement about that. So they're on the right page, again, trying to make things better. But when you look at the numbers of people who can die in a bad weekend in Chicago, it far and away eclipses all of the shootings by police. Now, what's interesting is the news media will never tell you the story about the white guy that gets shot by the cops.
That's true.
Okay? Now, more whites than blacks are shot, but blacks are a much smaller population, so per capita, more blacks are killed. I agree. But now here's what no one talks about. How many of those who were killed didn't go to college, didn't finish high school, came from a family where there was no male influence in their lives? Let's get away from race and look at more societal issues, okay? Because I'm willing to bet that if you look at the blacks who were shot by the police and the whites who were shot by police, you may find lots of common issues. Single-parent families, living in poverty, parents who are alcoholics or drug users. Those would be very important information to have so we could work to prevent children from going that wrong way on that one-way street. No one wants to talk about that because this isn't about solving the problems. And when you convince young black men that the cop who's pulling them over is about to kill them, they're going to react in a way that's going to alarm the police officer. And I've done car stops. I've had people try to run me down. When you stop a car, there could be weapons in the car. We stopped the car. One day I'll tell you the story. We took a machine gun out of the car. So you don't know what you're getting. You're throwing your hook into a very deep ocean. You caught a fish, but you don't even know what species fish you caught. And when the driver acts in a weird way that gets your adrenaline flowing, bad things are likely to happen. And when I hear from these politicians and these journalists, I'm black, I gave my son the talk. Let me tell you what, I'm white skin. My kids are white. I gave them the talk. My father gave me the talk.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because
mine did too.
Okay, so this isn't black-white.
No.
And understand the problem. Instead of saying we're all Americans and we all want the police to keep our community safe, we're turning the police into the bad guys. Oh, we're not defunding the police. We're just going to put the money elsewhere. No, that's defunding the police. If you had an allowance and your parents say, well, we're going to use your allowance to buy a Thanksgiving dinner, they took away your allowance. You've been defunded. They can call it whatever they want. See, if we really want to solve these problems, we can. By the way, another issue I'd love to see, the marching orders that you get when you go to work comes back to your evaluation. And I've recommended this to Congress. I don't think they've ever done it. I wish they would. You want to know what's going on with immigration enforcement or any other program? Get your hands on the critical elements of the job description and the evaluation critical elements. If you're telling a cop that you must meet a quota of arrests, then you're telling that police officer that he has to escalate situations to the point where he can justify handcuffing.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so let's look at those evaluations and ask ourselves, what are the marching orders these departments are giving the police?
Mm-hmm.
Are they willing to accept the idea that the cop didn't make an arrest because he defused a dangerous situation and give him an award for that?
That's right.
You see, so there's so many approaches that if I was running things that I would take. But are you hearing this in the news? No.
No.
And as soon as there's a black guy who's shot, black guy shot, white cop, or by the police, and then you find out that the cop was black.
Right.
It's selective enforcement. You know, the old thing, if a tree falls in the forest, there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? I have a better question. If the tree falls in the forest and the reporters are willing to report about it, do you know the tree fell?
Right, true. Right.
Think about that.
Yeah, no, true.
So you have selective reporting. They wait for that opportunity. Aha! Some cop just shot a black man. Let's get camera crews over there. And before anyone knows what happened, it's the headline. And then you find out that the guy had a machine gun and he was spraying the cops with bullets. I mean, what did you expect him to do? Die? A final point that I have to make. The criminals I arrested, for the most part, were smarter and had more integrity than most of these nitwits that we've elected to public office.
That's true. Okay.
Let me tell you why I say it. And I think specifically about this imbecile, the Andy and Chris Cuomo Act.
Oh.
We inadvertently, and again, one day I'll tell you off air or on your program if you want to do that. And I do this to Dennis Michael Lynch, by the way. I would ask all of you, consider becoming part of Team DML. It's a subscription service. But I do a couple of podcasts per week for Dennis, and it's fun doing it. In fact, this week I was doing war stories because they had me on for a whole week. But they were instructional. We inadvertently photographed the kidnapping going down. So the bad guy is on, because they were setting up cameras to film an undercover drug deal, because we were going to try to get to the top of a drug trafficking organization. So you get people to roll over and you work your way up the chain. A cop in a van, without realizing it, videotapes the kidnapping. Think about that. When we went out and we started working with the cops and we wound up arresting people from California to Florida. They had killed a couple of topless dancers. I don't mean to be sick. They beheaded them. They really were topless because they stole counterfeit money from the mob. It involved narcotics. There were killings in California. We had lawyers involved. It was a mess. But they brought the guy in that did the kidnapping. I was out making an arrest on another individual. We had fanned out all over the city, pulling them off the street so nobody knew what we were doing. And the guy is there with his lawyer screaming at the ATF agents. I didn't do it. This is a setup. You're all liars. And he's yelling 4-letter curse words. And the lawyer is threatening the agents that he's going to go to Internal Affairs and he's going to sue them and all this. And then, as Warner Wolf, the sportscaster in New York, might have said, let's go to the videotape. And the guy saw himself on tape in glorious color, up close, where his face was as clear as my face is right now. And there he is with a submachine gun, pushing this guy into a car after he handcuffs him from behind. In fact, the cops had stopped the car, pulled the guy out, and they find he's already handcuffed. They're trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
Right.
Picture that. And they find a loaded machine gun on the floor of the car. The guy looked at the videotape. He turned to the agents. He said, you're going to have to forgive me. He stood up, went to the garbage can, and relieved himself of about 3 days' worth of food. And he said, you got me. You got me. And the attorney turned to the agents and he said, gentlemen, I apologize. I believe my client clearly he was lying. Now, why do I tell you the story? Because Chris Cuomo and other politicians have been all over the media on national news programs. They knew they were being videotaped. They were hamming for the cameras. Oh, the federal government gave us everything we needed. They gave us the hospital ship, and they gave us the Javits Center, and they geared up to produce the respirators or the ventilators. And wow, we can't complain. The feds did. And then 3 weeks later, Cuomo comes out and says, Trump killed all those people.
Right.
Wait a moment. You were on national television 3 weeks ago on multiple programs saying you got everything you needed. Mm-hmm. Unlike the criminal who said, well, they got me on videotape. It's time to pack it in.
Right.
And in fact, the guy wanted to be a cooperator. Right. Is there anything I could tell you that's going to help? Because I have 5 prior arrests, and the guy was a Dominican drug dealer. And they said, no, you're going to jail. If you want to give us information, that's great, but you're looking at life in jail, which is why he tossed his cookies. Mm-hmm. So that guy is still sitting in a cage somewhere, okay? But But the politicians know they were videotaped, and they still have the chutzpah to get in front of the cameras and lie through their teeth.
That's right.
Now, you tell me who has more integrity and more common sense, and ask yourself how much those politicians are playing us for imbeciles. It should infuriate you. This guy knew he was standing in front of the cameras and he has the brass balls to get out there 3 weeks later and do a 180 on this stuff. Folks, please understand what we're up against. Mm-hmm. This is an election of consequence. America today stands at crossroads. What I would love to see happen is a resurgence, a rebirth of the Democratic Party, the party of JFK and Harry Truman. Because when you think of what JFK had to say, when you think about his warnings from almost 6 decades ago that ring so true in America today, that's the party I want to belong to. And I'm willing to bet that that's the party that you want to belong to. You got to get involved. I always like to make the point at the end of my programs, democracy is not a spectator sport.
That's right.
And even if you win over just one person with the facts, don't get in their face.
No.
They're not bad people. Most of them are compassionate, and that's what these bums have done. They've taken compassion, which is a virtue, and turned it into a weapon, and they're using it against us. We need to turn this around.
Mike, incredible and are very articulately spoken. It's words that folks not only need to digest, but they need to implement. Because you're right. Many people say, I'm one person. How can I make a difference? And you're right on target. By speaking the truth, shining the light on the truth of the issues at hand, as you did throughout our interview today, and again, treating people with dignity and respect. They're not bad people.
No.
The people outside this window, the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, they disagree. They haven't thought about the issues the way you presented them. That doesn't mean they cannot think about issues in a different means, but you have to present it to them in a articulate, comprehensive fashion, as you have done.
And non-confrontational.
That's right.
Funny thing happened. You know who Chris Kobach is, I'm sure. He
yes.
was the Secretary of State for Kansas and so forth. He helped Donald Trump. He helped Arizona. I know him because he represented Lou Barletta when he was the mayor of Hazelton and got sued because he enacted the first immigration ordinances. Chris Kobach was my first debate partner right after 9/11. We went to Kansas State. And what was remarkable was we debated an immigration lawyer, a woman who came here from Russia, and a woman, I believe she was Mexican. She was incorrigible. She was just a lost cause. But after the debate, that it was about comprehensive reform and driver's licenses for illegal aliens, we're sitting on stage, and it was the first time this ever happened to me. And it was interesting because one of my buddies who had moved to Kansas was in the audience. So he came up, and there was a long line of people who wanted my autograph or wanted to have a picture taken with me. And I wasn't used to this. It was very startling, needless to say. And the lawyer whom I just debated walked up to me, and we're sitting at this table signing autographs. And Chris Kobach said to me, Mike, she's not done with you. I said, my goodness. So I stood up. Her name was Medvani. I'm sorry I forgot her first name, but her last name was Ms. Medvani. And she looked at me and she said, Mr. Cutler, can I speak to you? And I said, sure. And I thought, here we go. And she said, I want to apologize. Now, this has never happened to me. I was undefeated in my high school and college debating teams. I used to argue bail for the U.S. attorneys because no one got bail because, again, fact-based. But she said to me, since 9/11, and this was maybe 2 years or a year after 9/11, I've been afraid to drive past an airport. She said, I wouldn't even think of getting on an airplane. And here I am arguing with you about the sense of giving driver's licenses to people who could turn out to be terrorists. She said, I don't know what I was thinking. She said, so I just want to apologize, and I have a wish for you. I said, what's that? She said, I wish you would take your intelligent message across America and wake us all up the way you woke me up today. She kissed me on my cheek, gave me a hug, and disappeared. And Chris Kobach looked at me. I swear his chin hit the table in front of him. He said, Mike, I've never heard anything like that. I said, neither have I. Now, why do I tell you this? because you can win
Yes,
people over.
it's
When
true.
you do debates, you aim at the fence sitter. You don't aim at the deeply entrenched. Well, this woman could not have been more deeply entrenched. But you know what John Adams had to say, one of the founding fathers? Facts are stubborn things.
Mm-hmm.
And always end your discussion with your friends, not with a statement. Don't do that. End it with a question.
Mm-hmm.
Questions are very funny things because questions will rattle around in your head like a marble in an empty coffee can.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't go away. You'll be driving your car and you're stuck in traffic, the question pops up. You're showering to go to work, the question pops up. You're walking your dog, the question is going to pop up. So I'm going to leave you with a question. I did this at Fox and Friends First last year, and I got high fives from the whole crew. So let's try this, and try this on your friends. Would you be willing to get on an airplane if you saw some of the passengers on your flight sneaking past the TSA? If not, why in the world are we being forced to live among millions
That's
of
right.
people who have no right to be here, who snuck past a very similar vetting process
Mm-hmm.
that is conducted at ports of entry? How's that for an interesting question? Or does it make sense to admit more foreign workers than the number of new jobs that we're creating? Think about the game of musical chairs.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if someone kicked open the door and let lots more kids in the room, but nobody brings any more chairs. How's that game going to play? That's what we're talking about, folks. These aren't complicated issues when you can bring them down to bite size. You know, Carl Sagan, I met Carl Sagan. My original love was astronomy. I'm still very much into it. My 4 kids love astronomy. 2 of my kids are engineers. And he said it's character building
Mm-hmm.
because you learn to understand our place in the universe. We are microorganisms that inhabit a mote of dust suspended in infinity. He did this thing called the pale blue dot. You really need to read it. It's an incredible statement about who we really are. Our life expectancy is the snap of a finger, and we're tiny. These people with these huge egos are missing the point to the exercise. But it's also about learning how to break things down so that you can wrap your brain around numbers and concepts that you otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Mm-hmm.
If I told you that I drove for 4 hours and went from New York to Washington, you know, Dave, you'd say to me, well, Mike was probably going about 55 miles an hour. It's about a 240-mile trip. Yeah, I can relate to that. But then if I say to you, you see that star? That star is 1,000 light years away, and light travels 186,000 miles per second. Can you relate to 186,000 miles? Can you relate to traveling at that speed? Of course not. So you use analogies. When you hear about millions of people, it doesn't mean anything. That's why Stalin and Alan Dershowitz spoke at a memorial service for the Holocaust, and he was brilliant. I'm a big Alan Dershowitz fan. Even when they disagree with him, I don't care. As Americans, we're supposed to disagree. That doesn't make us enemies. It makes us Americans. You celebrate the First Amendment by debating. Think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Dershowitz said that when there is a mass murder, when there's a terror attack, when there's a Holocaust, always think of whatever the number is and multiply it by the number 1. Because Stalin had said 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic, 1 death is a tragedy.
Yeah, that's right.
Anne Frank was so impactful. Why? This one girl, 6 million Jews, 13 million people killed by that scum.
Mm-hmm.
My family was decimated. I was named for my mother's mother, my grandmother, who was killed in Poland because she couldn't get out of Poland. My mother was able to as a 13-year-old. My mother felt she had American privilege, living by herself in a rooming house in a strange country with a strange language, supporting herself by working in a sweatshop making umbrellas for $3 a week. But she was here legally, I want to add. But she considered it a privilege to be here. My first wife's parents were in the Holocaust. Her mother was in a concentration camp. I said, how did that happen? She said, everyone said it can't get worse. These are lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
But the point of the matter is that Anne Frank was so impactful because you got to see the Holocaust through her eyes. I was in that house in Amsterdam. I signed the guest book. And I remember what I wrote. I was there with my first wife, may she rest in peace. And what I wrote was, never again must mean never again.
Mm-hmm.
You see, there's a lesson there, folks.
There
I
is.
think of Kristallnacht, where they destroyed the businesses of the Jews and I look at what's happened to businesses around the country. And Tucker Carlson made an interesting point. How better to destroy the competition for Amazon and all the big box stores?
That's right.
Between COVID and the riots.
That's right.
Because I've always said to people, go to your local store. I bought a TV. It cost me $100 more, but he's got mouths to feed.
Right.
Well, when those stores go away, their ability to support their family goes away, and you're stuck going to Amazon or Best Buy. Now, look, I go to Best Buy. It's fine. But the point is, who's doing the bidding for whom here? Mm-hmm. Who is paying for this? Again, ask yourself how it is that Amazon made record amounts of money. We're talking billions of dollars in 1 week. Billions of dollars more because of the riots that have destroyed the livelihoods of how many Americans. We have to look at this objectively, folks, and ask ourselves, at what point do you say I've had enough and I must stand up? Once it's too late, once it's over, it's over. Once the car goes off the cliff, don't tell me you're going to bring it to the car wash. We have to stop the car from going off the cliff. We have to make the politicians accountable. Mm-hmm. We have to be the pea under that mattress. The politicians in Washington know who I am, and that pleases me. And if I piss them off, that pleases me more.
I completely agree.
Judge a person by his friends as well as his enemies if he's acquired those people for the right reasons. We have an obligation to our children. You can't be a good parent or a good grandparent or a good uncle or a good aunt if you aren't looking out for the future of those children who are so close and so important to you. Just something else I wanted to throw in before we wrap it up.
I appreciate that, Mike. And how can folks follow you on a daily basis? Because they need to follow you on a daily basis, Mike.
Boy, it sounds like stalkers now. I'm just talking. My website is michaelcutler.net. I write for Front Page Magazine. I'm very proud to have been working with David Horowitz of the Freedom Center. Mm-hmm. Gosh, it's got to be about 6 or 7 years now. I also do podcasts for Dennis Michael Lynch, Team DML, DMLnews.com. It's something you may want to consider becoming a subscriber. I know that you have subscribers at your terrific website, which I also think is a great place to go.
Thank you.
But we'll add another one for you, because my goal is to give you the information that you're not going to get from the mainstream media. And you're right. They have people come on that bloviate. They have no idea what they're talking about. Sure. It makes me think about the late Charles Krauthammer, and I thought he was inspirational. I was a big Krauthammer fan. But one day they were discussing immigration. And, they always deferred to him because he was so brilliant. And he said, well, if these people have been living here for the last 10 years and they haven't been arrested, of course we should give them legal status. Well, what Charles didn't understand, and what the other people on the set didn't understand, is there's no way to know how long an illegal alien's been living
That's
there.
Right.
There's no interviews. If you're dealing with a couple thousand people, you can show photographs, you knock on doors. I've done this work. But when you're dealing with millions, and understand it takes minutes to approve an application, days to deny one, the pressure is on to approve. And immigration fraud was the key method of entry and embedding for the terrorists, okay? So the guy is going to say, I came here 8 years ago, and I used 6 different names. And the adjudicator is going to look at this and say, oh my gosh, what do I do? His boss is going to say, approve it. Prove it. What? You can't prove otherwise. If you can prove that he came here last week, fine. Can you prove that? Well, no. Then you may as well approve the application. You can't prove a negative. Okay? So the pressure will be on so that anybody who gets here would automatically get a green card. Is that what we want? I mean, understand the issue, but Charles didn't understand it.
Right.
He meant well. And the idea they've never been arrested, terrorists don't get arrested.
That's right.
Sleeper agents are trained to not spit on the sidewalk. Smile at people, even as you're preparing to board the airplane that you're going to blow up. Don't do anything that calls attention to yourself. Somebody once very wisely pointed out that an effective spy is someone who would not attract the attention of a waiter or waitress at a greasy spoon diner. You could say the same thing of a good terrorist, and by the way, the terrorist might well be that waiter or waitress or dishwasher. I arrested a dishwasher in a restaurant in Staten Island. We didn't know it at the time. This is the early 80s. When they took him back to his house to try to find his passport, we found bags filled to the top with coupons for stuff he had no need for. Sanitary napkins for women, dog food, formulas for babies, diapers. He and another young man were living in an apartment. Why would they keep those coupons? He said, oh, the kids in the neighborhood play with them. How do you play with coupons? And he never answered me. We deported him. And then there was a story on one of the networks back in the early 80s when they really had news programs. And what was the story about? How Yasser Arafat had sent people to the United States to engage in coupon fraud so that they would fund terrorism. And so we started digging into it. And what we found was alarming. You had little bodegas, little grocery stores that were committing coupon fraud. And companies like General Mills and Kraft Foods had former law enforcement agents working for them doing corporate security, looking for fraud. And they found some store that I don't remember the product, it doesn't matter, but to give you the example, suddenly the store that last year sold 100 boxes of Cheerios redeemed $10,000 worth of coupons for Cheerios, let's say. And they looked at that and they said, wait a minute, we have an invoice, we know how much we shipped them, how is this possible? So they went after the storekeeper, but he had disappeared. What we started to see was a pattern where not only would these people commit coupon fraud, but they would set fire to their stores and get the insurance money, and people were dying in the fires. I would argue these were acts of terrorism. Mm-hmm. So here is a guy with bags filled to the brim with coupons. Guess why he was here? Funding international terrorism. And on 9/11, I wondered where he was, you see. And he was in great physical shape. This guy went out of transom in this restaurant. We arrested like 10 or 12 people. He was literally running on the roofs of cars and sliding under other cars. It took us 15 minutes to finally corner this guy. He was in the shape of an Olympic athlete, and he spoke fluent English. He was from Egypt. I will never forget him. So my point that I make is understand how this is going on under our nose. They just arrested a terrorist for selling narcotics in the United States. That's how you fund terrorism. You commit more crime. So we're being hammered 8 ways from Sunday, and you have sanctuary cities that are shielding this kind of individual from detection. People are dying, folks. And let me tell you why Biden is finally now talking about the violence in the cities. He doesn't care about the lives, but he cares about the votes. And they did the math, and they said, uh-oh, we're liable to lose votes. We've already lost lots of lives. That's collateral damage. Mm-hmm. But now we're starting to lose votes. This is a problem. And that's why suddenly, first they said there is no violence.
That's
Obama
right.
said there is no violence.
That's right.
It's it was the evolution of a lie. I used to interrogate bad guys, and they say, why don't we start out with the truth? Because there's only one version of the truth. Well, for Obama and Biden and all these other dirtbags, truth is an evolving process. So now they're admitting that the violence happened, but of course, with a twist, because the violence that wasn't happening is happening because Trump did it. Right. Think about that switch. No violence, no violence, no violence. There's lots of violence, and it's all because of Trump. Right. Well, why did you say that? So let's go back to the videotape again. Mm-hmm. You could find the video. Trump, he didn't take it seriously. Trump stopped people from China, and he was called a xenophobe by Cuomo. Okay? Mm-hmm. By the mayor, by Pelosi. Mm-hmm. By the way, didn't Pelosi have one hell of a bad hair day last week?
Yeah, it was a bad one. Well, Mike, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your inspiration. Folks, thank you for joining us today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for joining us today.